What's up, Fox 7 Fox here? We're taking a look at the RTX 4090 in 2023. Now, the RTX 4090 is still currently the absolute king of gaming and retails for about $1,700. Now, I got mine for about $2,000 because I got a protection plan with it. And oh my god, my bank is killing me. But when you play video games as often as I do and it becomes ingrained in part of your life, it's sort of something that I have battled with for a long time, and I decided to just take the plunge and get the 4090, which means upgrade paths in the future, although relatively non-existent on this specific sort of generation. In the future, I should be able to sell the 4090 and get close to the amount of money for, say, a 5090 or 6090 in the future, because the 90 series tends to hold their value the most. And I know that that doesn't really matter to a lot of you, but I also care a lot about budget, and I want people to understand that I'm not some sort of fancy tech YouTuber who has all the money in the world, and it kind of gives you my plan. And on top of that, I'm apologize for the lack of video quality here, but I just moved house, so for a while this is probably what you're going to see until I get my camera and mic set up. Now, I have the smallest RTX 4080 in the world, as quoted by somebody at Micro Center, the PNY RTX 4090. I am not going to be taking this thing out of its chassis. I ain't touching this thing with a 10-foot pole. It's good where it's at, and I'm keeping it that way because I've had so many issues with this PC, which I'll talk about at the end of the video. This thing has 16,384 CUDA cores, with a clock speed of 2,235 megahertz, and a boost clock of 2,520 megahertz. It has a memory speed of 21 gigabytes per second, and that memory is 24 gigabytes of GDDR6X. It has a TDP of 450 watts. And for the first time in my life, I actually have a CPU bottleneck, especially with a Ryzen 9 5900X. I don't know how that's possible. And yet some of the games did bottleneck with the CPU, primarily Modern Warfare 2. But with that said, let's get into the benchmarks. Up first is Metro Exodus Enhanced at Ultra with ray tracing on at 3440 by 1440. I do play at this resolution. This is ultra wide 1440p. We saw an average frame rate of 144 FPS with a 1% low of 105 and a 0.1% low of 96. Now, I've heard a lot of people saying that Metro Exodus Enhanced actually runs better than the old Metro Exodus does, and I can corroborate the story because this ran fantastic, especially the fact that ray tracing was also on Ultra. This game looked fantastic and ran perfectly smooth. And of course, you can't have a 4090 benchmark without Cyberpunk 2077. Now, this has no ray tracing and was only set to very high, which is still incredibly surprising to me considering the fact that we have an RTX 4090 in the build. We saw an average frame rate of 100 with a 1% low of 8 and a 0.1% low of 2. So we still saw some stutter as well, which I'm going to account to the 5900X. But otherwise, the game ran perfectly fine, and I've had no issues actually playing the game as opposed to running the benchmark, so just keep that in mind for the future. One of the newest games on the list is the Resident Evil 4 demo. At max settings, we saw an average frame rate of 144 with a 1% low of 124, and the 1.1% low was perfectly fine. I don't know why it didn't record, but the 0.1% low was perfectly fine. This game had no issues whatsoever and ran great, and this is with ray tracing on to the max settings, so you're gonna have no issues whatsoever with the 4090 at this resolution at all. And last but kind of least is Modern Warfare 2 with the balanced preset. Now, I understand that that sounds weird, but there are certain settings that cause the game to stutter no matter what graphics card you have, so setting it to balance just meant that I was able to get a smooth, consistent frame rate, and that's what I play on normally. We saw an average frame rate of 136 with a 1% low of 33 and a 0.1% low of 32. Now, this game regularly exceeds the 136 frames per second, but for some reason the benchmark is a lot more intensive than anything else, and that also lends credence to the 1% and 0.1% low frame rate as well. So the RTX 4090 is going to have no problem in modern games whatsoever, but it did cause me so many problems. Now, that's sort of the end of the benchmarks. To end the story of the benchmarks, you have no issues playing any sort of game that you throw at this thing. I think if you expected anything else from an RTX 4090, you've got issues. I think that this would be more interesting for synthetic benchmarks and things like that, but I just don't do any of that, so I figured I would stick to gaming for this one. But if you want to see a video in the future with sort of more 3D intensive, you know, actual VRAM using materials, actual VRAM, actually like programs that push the VRAM to its limit, let me know in the comments down below. I'm happy to do that. But for now, we're just doing some gaming, and you're going to be able to do whatever you want on this 4090 in terms of gaming and have zero issues whatsoever. Now, with that said, the 450 TDP is insane. I have been trying to find the correct power supply for this thing, and I finally have. I have a 1200 watt in my system now to go with the 5900X, and even still, that is barely enough for the amount of stuff that I have in here, including RGB lights, RAM, everything else as well. It's just going to draw a lot of power, and I've had a lot of issues. I actually had a faulty PSU, my 850 watt kept turning off, and then my CPU started overheating. So if you look in some of the benchmarks, my CPU gets very hot, and that is just the way that it is because I have it installed with a Wraith cooler now, and I'm going to change that to an Octo in the future, which I think also lends a little bit to the fact that there have been some CPU benchmarks here and there, but I also just think that the 4090 is so damn fast that even a 12-core CPU can't keep up with it. Otherwise, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do what you usually do, and as always, buy yourself something nice.